She was 8 months pregnant, carrying a tray of food, and wearing a uniform that smelled like kitchen grease, and the man who destroyed her life just sat down at table 7. Some people get a second chance they never asked for. This is one of those stories. This is the story of a woman who lost everything: her marriage, her home, her future, and rebuilt it on her feet, one table at a time. And the man who walked away from her had no idea that walking back into that restaurant would change both their lives forever. Stay with me, because the ending is not what you expect. Her name was Claire. She was 29, sharp, and had one of those smiles that made strangers feel like old friends. She had spent 4 years married to a man named Grant Whitaker, a man who had money, connections, and a very convincing way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world, until you weren't. The divorce was not dramatic. That was the painful part. There was no screaming, no thrown plates. Grant simply told her one evening, very calmly, that he had outgrown the relationship. Like she was a jacket he used to like. He handed her the papers, called his lawyer, and within 6 months, she was out of the house, out of his life, and out of every plan she had made for her future. What Grant did not know, what Claire had found out just weeks after signing those papers, was that she was pregnant. She thought about telling him. She picked up the phone more times than she could count. But every time she remembered the way he looked at her when he handed her those papers, calm, unbothered, already gone. And she thought, no, this baby is mine. I will figure this out myself. And she tried. She really tried. She moved into a small apartment, 2 neighborhoods, away from the life she used to have. She applied for jobs. She had a degree, she had experience, but a growing belly. In a job interview has a way of making opportunities disappear. Nobody said it. Nobody had to. By month 7, her savings were almost gone. A friend mentioned a restaurant nearby that hired waitstaff and paid cash at the end of every shift. It was not the plan, but it was something. So Claire put on the blue uniform, tied her apron over her belly, and showed up. The other waitresses looked out for her. They covered her when her feet swelled. They saved her the easier sections. She was grateful in a way that only people who have lost everything can truly understand, deeply, quietly, and without the ability to fully express it. She worked 6 days a week. She smiled at strangers. She carried plates that were too heavy and stood for hours on floors that were too hard. Every night she drove home, sat in her car for a few minutes before going inside, and let herself feel whatever she was feeling. Then she went in, ate whatever she could afford, and went to sleep. This was her life, and she had made a kind of peace with it. Then, one Thursday evening in November, Table 7 got a reservation for 1. Grant Whitaker had been having a good year. His company had expanded. He had been featured in a business magazine. He was, by every visible measure, exactly the kind of man who wins. He came to the restaurant because a colleague had recommended it. He was on his phone when he sat down. He did not look up right away. Claire saw him before he saw her. She froze at the service station, tray in hand, and for a moment the entire room went silent in her head. Every sound disappeared, just her heartbeat and the sight of the man who had quietly ended her world. Sitting 12 feet away from her, reading the menu like it was any other Thursday, she had 2 options. She could ask another waitress to take the table, or she could do her job. She walked over. "Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" He looked up. The moment lasted maybe 3 seconds. But inside those 3 seconds lived 4 years of marriage, 1 divorce, and a pregnancy he knew nothing about. His eyes dropped to her belly, then back to her face. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. Claire did not cry. She did not shake. She held the tray steady and waited. "Claire." That was all he said. "Water or something else?" she replied. He stayed. She doesn't fully know why she didn't walk away, and he doesn't fully know why he didn't leave. But something held them both in that room. At the end of her shift, he was still there. He had eaten alone, tipped more than the bill, and was sitting with a coffee going cold in front of him when the restaurant began to empty. She walked over one last time to clear the table. "Is it mine?" he asked quietly, not accusing, just asking. She looked at him for a long moment. "Yes." He put his head in his hands. What happened next is the part of the story people find hard to believe. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was so human. He did not try to take over. He did not call lawyers or make demands. He asked if he could call her sometime. She said she would think about it. She went home, sat in her car, and this time she did not cry either. She was past crying. She was in the part of grief that looks like strength from the outside. She called him 3 days later. They did not get back together. Let's be clear about that. This is not that kind of story. Some things once broken do not go back to what they were, and Claire was not looking to go back. She had built something in that small apartment. In that blue uniform, in those long nights, she had built a version of herself that was harder and softer at the same time. a version she actually respected. But they talked, slowly, carefully, like two people learning a new language. Grant showed up. He came to doctor's appointments. He fixed the broken heater in her apartment without being asked. He did not try to rewrite history or explain himself out of what he had done. He just showed up and did the next thing. Research on co-parenting after separation shows that children raised in cooperative environments, even when parents are not together, show significantly better emotional development than those raised in high-conflict ones. Claire knew this. She chose the harder, better option. Not for Grant, for the baby. Their daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in January. 7 pounds, 4 ounces? She had Claire's eyes and Grant's chin and absolutely no interest in sleeping through the night. Grant was in the waiting room. Claire's mother was with her in the room. When the nurse came out to tell him, he sat alone with that news for a few minutes. He said later it was the first time in years he had felt something real. Claire went back to work 8 weeks later. Not at the restaurant. Grant had offered to help financially, and after a long internal fight with her own pride, she accepted. She went back to her actual field. She is, as of now, working for a nonprofit that helps single mothers navigate exactly the kind of year she just survived. She says the restaurant was the hardest chapter of her life. She also says it was the one that taught her who she actually was. Grant is not the villain of this story. He's also not the hero. He's just a person who woke up late and tried to do better. Some people never wake up at all. And Claire is someone who served plates while 8 months pregnant so her daughter would have a safe place to come home to. That's not a small thing. That's everything. If this story moved you even a little, watch the next video on screen right now. It's one you won't want to miss.